And I always find, when you go to these events, that one of the things I get most out of it is I hear people talk about things in a different way, and they think about things in a different way than I do. And it starts to get the neurons firing, and even the conversations earlier on, you're going, oh, that's interesting. And next thing your brain is starting to go a little bit bananas. But it's good because it just kind of fires us all up a little bit. So, you see it okay? Yeah? Okay, so I'm Rob Fox. I'm the CEO and founder of CitA Passport. We're a supply chain and procurement technology platform for the construction industry and for the built environment. My own background, I suppose, is I'm a civil engineer originally. Worked in construction for over 20 years, both in Ireland and Australia. Worked for mainly Tier 1 main contractors. And I suppose I learned a lot in those 20 years about construction. But construction is a fantastic industry, and it's amazing people and everything else, but it's also one of the most frustrating industries as well. And so I suppose I felt, I got an opportunity to develop a company that might help solve some of the challenges in construction. And in construction, the supply chain, subcontractor suppliers, are the biggest part of any construction project. So I thought that'd be a good place to start. So, and I just wanted to touch on this, I suppose, we're, as I say, supply chain procurement solutions. Just on I suppose, around the bottom piece around consultancy software and support. So this is what we provide, and it's mainly software, but based on what Saoirse was talking about earlier on, you can't just give somebody some software and say, there you go, plug it in, knock yourself out. There is this piece in advance of that, obviously, of trying to figure out. Saoirse spoke to it about trying to figure out what the needs are and what the problems are. And part of the solution and part of the service that we provide is actually trying to come in early to provide some consultancy and some advice around that. Sometimes people will bring in consultants to help them, which is always a good idea. But the danger is that becomes a very long, drawn-out process. But I still think it's a good idea. But very often, we provide that consultancy service to our customers. Then obviously we provide the software. But the support piece is as big as any of it, because the support from the implementation strategy, the whole adoption strategy, and just staying with our customers to make sure that they continue to get the value out of our software, they continue to use it, and all those things. And that means staying very, very close to our customers, and that's really important in the construction industry, where it's a very busy industry, and you do need to kind of just stick with people and guide them along the way. So I just wrote about Enterprise Ireland there. Obviously, we're an Enterprise Ireland client. We're what they call a high potential startup. And we've been supported by Enterprise Ireland for the last 5 years. We got investment from Enterprise Ireland and from other investors last year. So we're always very grateful to Enterprise Ireland for the funding, but also the support that they provide as well. And the Built to Innovate scheme is fantastic. I don't think there's enough companies that maybe are aware of it, or if they're aware of it, are getting the benefit from it, because it'll provide funding. One of the blockers in relation to starting a project or starting the adoption of a new technology or a new process is the funding. So the funding is there. So if you get the funding issue out of the way, sometimes that unblocks the issue for people. I suppose just to go back to, I'm going to talk very briefly about what we do and why we do it. But the main reason I suppose we do this is that, as touched on earlier on, 80% of the value of a construction project is subcontractors and suppliers. So if you're a construction company, it's all about the subcontractors and the supply chain. 15% is overheads and costs, and 5% is profit margin. So one of the challenges in the construction industry is that profit margins are thin, and you can make money, but you can lose money pretty quickly too. So we focus on the 80% because the 15% is never going to change. It usually increases, and the only way you're going to move the dial into 5% is to tackle the 80%. It's as simple as that. So I suppose our mission really is that we want to help our customers optimise that 8% by providing best-in-class procurement and supply chain solutions, because that's where the value is, that's where the risk is. And really, we're around helping companies do lots of different things around process, but one of the key parts is helping companies capture, organise, analyse and visualise the data that relates to their supply chain. And that obviously helps improve decision making around particularly subcontractor and supplier selection, because if you're going to spend 80% of the money on subcontractor suppliers, pick the right ones that are going to be capable of doing the job and have all the competency and compliance in place. And everybody knows better data leads to better decision making, leads to better outcomes. And these outcomes, you can see here, I won't go through them all, but I mean, none of them are productivity. Productivity with technology is a given. It should be more seamless. It should be all of those things. I mean, if technology's not that, it's not even at the races. So we're all about, like, can we help make companies more competitive, more profitable, increase performance, improve governance, which is obviously becoming a bigger issue, and reduce risk. That's the name of the game. These are just some of the companies that we work with across the built environment. We work with property management companies and property developers as well as main contractors. And very briefly, just to give you an overview of what we do, and again, I won't take too long on this, but everything starts with, finding out who out there in the supply chain companies could be working with, because it's really about a matching exercise. I mean, every company is different. Every construction company is different. They all do largely the same job, but they all have different cultures, different approaches. And really what you're trying to find is who are the companies out there that best fit for your business. There's a process of engaging with those companies, getting to know them. We help accelerate that engagement and relationship building process. And then really key is segmenting the companies. This is where the data starts to come in, because even at the earliest stage when main contractors are pricing work, they need to get prices from the subcontractors as part of their bid. They need to make sure they're getting the right prices from the right subcontractors to make sure that their bid stacks up if they win the job. Because sometimes, the estimators win the job, they go great, and then they go, oh shit, there's a hole in that somewhere. So it's all about getting the right information to decide who even is suitable for pricing the project. There's a whole bid tender management, and I'm not going to go through that. And then, evaluation. As you get closer to the finishing line, deciding who you're going to pick for main contractors. It's about doing this evaluation. And that evaluation very often is done quite, ad hoc. It's not as analytical and as detailed as it should be. It's based on very often on relationships and emotions and all these sort of things. And it should really be based on data. Yes, people's gut and people's instincts and people's relationships are key, but it's really all about the data. Again, monitoring of supply chain once you decide who's the best company to put on the site is key. Insurances, compliance, competency, all those things. And onboarding and contracting. And, this is about making sure that when companies go on site, that the T's and C's essentially are agreed, so there's less chance of dispute and everybody knows what they're signed up to. But unfortunately in construction that gets rushed, so we try and provide people with a solution that takes everybody through that and makes it easier. And then out of all this data, you're getting insights, and ID obviously part of everything, around lean and all these things is about continuous improvement. So that's key for us. And this idea of having this central intelligence, because lots of companies have lots of intelligence within their organisation, but it tends to be siloed either in departments or in people's heads or in different formats in different locations. And the idea, I suppose, is trying to bring the central intelligence together that everybody can get some value out of. Okay, so that's the end of that piece. But I think it was important to give an overview of what we do and then the relevance of what I'm going to talk through now. So I suppose there's been an interesting evolution of software over the past 15 years that, since I worked in construction and set up Site Passport just over 6 years ago now. And I was talking to this with myself and Peter Lennox from Skill Net, we were talking about this earlier on, in that 10 or 15 years ago, there was a big rush to digitisation. Everybody felt they should be digitising and taking on technology, and there was pressure to take on technology and pressure to adopt BIM. So, and people got excited about technology, and there was apps for everything. And people were coming in and saying to their managing directors and their bosses, "I need this app," and people started buying lots of stuff. And what people ended up with, 3 or 4 years later, is this whole pile of disconnected single-point solutions that some of them did a good job, some of them were rubbish, some of them nobody used, and they kind of went, "What the hell have we got here?" But as myself and Peter were talking about earlier on, you have to kind of get in the mix, and you have to play with in the sandbox to kind of figure out where you're at and make those mistakes. So that's largely in the past. People are still struggling with disentangling their technology stack. And then people kind of got oh Jesus, that's a rubbish way of approaching technology. We're going to go for an all-in-one solution. And lots of the big vendors out there said, we can do everything. We do this, but now we can do this and this and this, and we're a one-stop shop and come to us. And some of that was successful and some of it wasn't. Most construction technology companies have a core area of expertise, and in my view, that's what they should stick to. But they start to build stuff around that's not their core expertise, and it actually devalues the overall product. So a lot of the big vendors are actually going back and saying, hang on, this is our core product. It could use these, but this is our core product. And I always think ERP systems are an interesting one. Every time I hear the word ERP, I always kind of break out a bit of a sweat because what the hell does that even mean? enterprise resource planning, I think it is, or programming, depending on who you're talking to. And I was going, oh God, if you hear ERP, it's like, it's a software that is very effective at times, but it takes a lot of customization, takes a lot of work. And most companies I speak to, when they say, oh, we've just implemented an ERP system, then they spend the next 10 minutes giving out about how problematic it was bringing it on board. So the latest, I suppose, transition in this evolution has been, now people are going, okay, we can't have 50 pieces of technology or applications. One isn't going to do it either. So now people are going back to this idea of having a small number of integrated best-in-class solutions. So trying to figure out, of all the jobs that need to be done in your organisation, which is the piece of software or technology that's best at doing that particular job, and then making sure that they're all connected to each other. It's kind of simple enough. And I suppose, I'm going to talk to the people part of it in a minute, because that's obviously hugely important and is the theme for today. But I think sometimes people look at their individual technologies, and say, okay, we're going to now do BIM, or we're going to do procurement, or we're going to do something else, and they kind of zone in on that, and they don't stand back and look at what the technology stack is, and looking at this approach of an integrated technology stack, just as helicopter view. And again, it's not like everything starts off design. I know there's planning and different things part. I'm not going to go into that, but design. There's a design aspect, design technologies. There's estimating technologies. There's procurement software and technologies that we provide. There's a field management and health and safety equality systems that are out there. And again, just giving a shout out to the sponsors today. Part of that field management is, time-lapse cameras, and Evercom provide an excellent service, an Irish company that's doing fantastically. There's the common data environments. Whether field managing common data environments are kind of the same thing. One of the challenges, though, is that particularly in this bottom area here, is that this is the piece that the supply chain interface with a lot, and everybody has different systems. So that's a challenge in the industry as well. If you're a subcontractor, you're working for 5 main contractors. You could be using Procore, you could be using Fieldwire, you could be using DFM, all these sort of things, and that's a challenge in itself. But that's not going to change, so there has to be a different way of approaching that. And then obviously there's accounts and finance software, and again, our friends in LiveCost, excellent solution around cost management for contractors too. But the reason I put this up is to kind of, if people say, we're going to look at a piece of software, you have to look at it in the context of all the other pieces of software and all the other technologies and departments within your business. So, but at the centre of all that, to give us a little plug again, but it is important, is the subcontractor database, because everything is around the supply chain. It's 80%, and everything in the supply chain touches off all of these. So the whole idea of integration and having things that people can speak to each other, systems that can speak to each other, is really, really key. So I suppose, when it comes to technology adoption, people either love technology or they hate it, or somewhere in between. And there can be lots of different reasons for that. We were talking earlier on about younger people coming out of college are more digitally native and just expect things to be digital, and then you get people who are later on in their careers who, digital is just not really a big part of their day-to-day job, and they think digital is what the rest of the company does to some degree. But it's a challenge because people can love or hate technology. Most of the people in this room love technology. That's why you're here. You get to go and you're excited. You see the benefits of it. But as Saoirse said, a big part of it is change, and people hate change. It makes them feel uncomfortable, and it sounds like hard work, and it is hard work. So I suppose it's just, again, as Saoirse was saying, recognising that, even though you might be enthusiastic about technology, not everybody's going to be, and how do you bring them with you? And one of the key areas that we see, I suppose, is, when you're talking to your own people, or we're talking to construction people, we're always thinking, and I was encourage you to think, like, what's in it for me? What's in it for the other people in your organisation? What are they going to get out of it? Because very often technology is mandated. You use this. If you don't use it, you're going to get a kick in the ass or whatever it's going to be. And, it's just can be quite a blunt approach. And it's much more nuanced than that. You have to think about, depending on the software, it might be relevant just to one department. It might be across loads of departments. But you have to think, what's the value proposition for those individuals? Why would they bother getting involved? What's in it for them? And really, I suppose, I think about this a lot in relation to the purpose of technology. And yes, it's to make organisations more efficient, and it's to add value to their organisations and productivity and all those things. But for individuals, it's all really about making your life easier. Like, if technology doesn't make your life easier, who wants to use that type of technology, So we all want to get to this kind of more Zen-like state rather than the frazzled, nature very often of construction. And that for me is a test. When you talk about what's in it for me, or why would people get on board, and why creating a culture and trying to encourage people to adopt technology, it's like, you ask yourself a question, is this going to make this person's life any easier? Because very often technology actually makes people harder. Even if you get through the painful, adoption and implementation process, you actually find sometimes it's not actually making life any easier. I'm just going back to Saoirse's slide on this. I had a slide of Saoirse's slide before today, and I just thought this was really interesting in relation to the champions and the resistors. And, this is one of the biggest challenges with anything, whether it's any level of change, whether it's technology or otherwise. And again, people are complex, and there's lots of different influencers and champions and everything in the business. And the champion is a really key person, but it depends on how influential that champion is in an organisation. So we as software vendors and software consultants are always looking to try and see, is the digital champion somebody who actually carries clout and has influence? Because you can have a digital champion that loves technology, but nobody listens to them. Nobody accepts their thing. So usually you find that digital champion needs to be somebody relatively senior who's respected in the organisation and is able to, what they say carries weight. So that's really important, because you get plenty of the active resistors, and the seriously, that's great. People put their hand up and say, I think this is a pile of shite. That's great. We love to hear that. We don't believe in it. We think this is not going to... At least they're telling you what they think. It's the people on the sidelines are kind of going, this will never go anywhere. I'll just sit tight now, and this will run itself into the ground like the last project did. So we spend a lot of time actually trying to find out these people and bring them into the room. And we deal a lot with quantity surveyors and estimators, just the nature of our business. And we are constantly bringing them in, inviting them in, even post-implementation stage. How's it going? Everything all right? Any issues? And if they say nothing, at least they'll be given an opportunity to say something. If they don't, you can't force it out of them. But you usually find that people will be quite vocal if you push them on it. And it comes down to the whole area of human psychology. I mean, it's just incredible, I suppose. Everybody, as we all know, has different views of the world and everything else. And it's how you bring those people along with you. And, everybody just has different traits, different experiences, different demographics. And in a big organisation, it can be really hard to kind of understand where everybody's coming from. And the challenge with all this, about implementation strategies and, and strategy analysis and stakeholder analysis, all that, it all sounds like an awful lot of hard work. And it sounds like it's going to take a long time, and you need to be out of energy before you'd even get to the implementation stage. So there is a balance of all these things. And, you have to keep coming back to the human part of it, what's in it for the team. And we do a bit of work around individual user personas, quite a bit of work, because, an estimator's needs is very different to a quantity surveyor's needs, and their psychology is quite different. An estimator has 3 weeks to price a project, full tender. Quantity surveyor has, maybe 6 months to procure it. So the whole mindset of how they go about things is quite different. And what fears they have, and what gets them, excites them, and what frightens them, and all these sort of things feeds into that. But for yourselves, if you're involved in trying to bring about digital change, again, sometimes you do need to break it down a little bit and say, what is the thing that gets this type of person going? You don't have to talk about everybody in the company, but you do have to break them into their cohorts and into their personas, and just do a little bit of analysis on where the objections might be. I suppose, I don't know if you can see that there, but when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, okay, how can I talk to what might be useful to people like yourselves who are probably those digital champions we talked about earlier on. And we look at this as called accelerate process, and it's really about, is the customer aligned and ready to buy? But it mirrors, I think, the approach or the thought process in relation to your own companies. Now, we talk about having access to decision makers, but in your own organisation, digital change, you guys are like, who are the decision makers? Are the decision makers on board? You mean you're going to do a whole lot of work and then go to the person who writes the check, and they're going to go, I don't know anything about this, and then you're back to square one. So, but for us, it's about having access to decision makers. But really, for companies, like yourselves trying to adopt technology, it's this clear vision of success, and what does success look like? So there's a problem, and you have to identify what the problem is within the organisation and get agreement that there is a problem. And then you're trying to look ahead and see, okay, well, what does success look like? And you have to break that down into what, success metrics. If we go from here to here and we achieve these things, that's success. And there has to be some measurement to it. The buying process, again, it goes back to decision making. But again, just giving you an insight on how we approach this, there has to be clarity on the buying process. Who goes through the various stages of deciding we're going to do an initial review of this, an evaluation, who ultimately signs the check. And again, these might not all be in the exact order. Just think about these acronyms. Sometimes they get things out of sync. But establish the pain point. Is there a problem? Does everybody agree what the pain point is? Is that pain point a high enough priority for the organisation? Because there's lots of pains in organisations. You can't solve all those pains at once. So you have to decide, okay, if you're doing a broad brush look at your company, you'd say, well, we've 10 core problems, and then you decide which of those is the biggest problem, that is the most urgent, that has the highest priority, that's going to give you the best bang for your buck if you solve it. And there has to be a budget. People will very often go out and start evaluating software, and again, there's no budget at all, or the budget hasn't been firmed up. Have you got 10 grand to spend? Have you got 100 grand to spend? So again, understanding that is important. But this goes back to the people piece around the objectors. What are the red flags and objections? We're always trying to find out who in the group that we're talking to is going to object. What's the red flags? So within your own organisations, it's just trying to find out, what are these blockers going to be within your organisation as early as possible. It might be people, it might be lots of different things. And again, for us, we're always looking at the advantage over our competitors. But again, part of the analysis when people are adopting software is, it's this evaluation process and being clear that the solution that you're going to adopt has a clear advantage over the competitors. And you know what that is and the reasons why you're choosing that product over something else. At the end of the day, there has to be a business case for everything. Technology is not just a toy. It's a tool that's meant to improve the business, help people work more efficiently, add more value to their company. And there has to be a tangible impact, and there has to be a return on the investment. And if you want to bring people on with you, particularly senior people, if you're trying to convince them to buy software, you have to try and work with your vendor or within your own company to establish what is the impact going to be and what's that return on investment. Because at the end of the day, usually the senior commercial people, that's all they want to know. What's it going to do for us? What's going to be the return on investment? And what impact is it going to have on the company? And there has to be an end game in place, obviously. This goes back to success metrics. Having a plan. We're going to start here and we're going to get to here. But you know what that end game looks like. So I suppose, there's loads of different moving parts to this, and it's not all about, I suppose, people, but, a requirement specification. We see all types of requirement specifications, and sometimes it's like 3 lines, this is what we want, and sometimes, which is not, can be a good start, but really, this is a bit more like what a requirement specification looks like. If you're going to decide you want to solve a problem, you need to understand at a granular level what the detail of that is. Because if you're going to go out to vendors and say, we want a solution that solves this procurement problem, you have to essentially, it's a bit like a client asking a main contractor to price a job. You have to give them all the same information and say, this is what we want, can you price it? You get the information back, they fill in the form, and then you're able to do an analysis and you're able to decide this is the company that provides or ticks most of our boxes. So I just can't emphasize enough in this whole idea of, yes, bring people along with you, but unfortunately it gets down to the dry, boring bit of, we have to list out what we want, we have to put a bit of thought into it, we have to get everybody to buy into it and develop out a schedule that if this is delivered, it'll be success, or we know the bits that aren't going to be delivered and we don't get a surprise at the end of the day. I suppose one of the last things I'll touch on is on the implementation strategy. And again, we're finding out more and more companies is that, our solution is quite a big solution. And people go, that's fantastic, Rob, solves lots of problems, and we can see it does the whole end-to-end and continuous improvement bit, but geez, my head is melted. Where do we start with this? So we, I suppose at the very early stage, started talking about our implementation strategy, and it's just to break it down for people. And it's very simple, We go, okay, first of all, you're probably going to use our database in order to, to get better value from the market. There's a process in the first 3 months, we'll work with you on that. Then after that, let's start on the evaluation and monitoring module once you're comfortable with how the database works and you go to the next stage. And after that then, let's talk about the bid and tender management piece, and then following on from that, it's the onboarding and contracting. So there are our 4 key modules. But where we have had problems before with companies, sometimes they're very enthusiastic and they want to do it all at once, and we have historically tried to respond to that requirement, and it kind of fell over for everybody. So we said, listen, hang on a second, this is our experience, trust us, let's break it down, let's do it in chunks. And trust is a huge part. I mean, you have to trust your vendor, you have to trust who you're buying your software off, and know that they understand your business, they care about your business, and they're going to bring you through it in a way that is pragmatic. And again, this is just something we've been working on with some of our customers recently. So you're breaking it down, but then the company's going to go, okay, do I need a new resource for this? What do I need? What's my input into getting this up and running? So again, it gets a bit dry at this stage, but it's like, we say, well, to implement a database solution, here's what we need from you. This is all you need to do. To implement this solution, there's very little, implementation required. It's just training. For this solution, there is a bit more interaction around evaluation and monitoring, setting that up. But here's what we need from you. And for the final part, for the onboarding contract, we say, this is, what we need from you. And again, that just makes people comfortable that there's a plan, and they, especially if your champions are going to senior people, you've got to empower those and enable those people, because they have the hard job of talking, say, to me, and they go, oh, that's great. They have to go and then tell 20 people, what the plan is or what the thing, and giving them the tools, and even, simple things like this are really, really effective. So if I was you as companies, I'd be looking at from your vendors to say, can you break this down for me? Help me sell this internally. Help me show people how we're going to do this. Because if you walk up to the managing director and say, we have this great solution that's going to solve all our problems from sourcing, supply chain to contracting with them, that sounds like a lot of work, lads. We don't have time for that, back to site. So it's just to help people. And I suppose just to finish up, it does come back to this. This was the theme for my talk, is what's in it for me. And if you want to bring people with you, you need to understand what's in it for them. They won't. If you ask them, they won't be long telling you what their issues are and the objections are and what they expect out of it. And if you can get people aligned and realise there's actually some value for them, this is not just about an improvement for the organisation. This is actually going to help you do your job. Stop doing the mundane stuff. Start doing the higher level stuff that you enjoy. Maybe get home at 6 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock. Maybe not have to work on weekends. All those things, like, what's in it for me? And you have to sell it. Digital transformation and digital adoption is a sales process as much as it is, a transition. You got to sell it to people, and at the end of the day, everybody looks at it from their own perspective. So think about the individual. That's it.